David thought he was doing a perfect job of hiding his poverty from his 8-year-old daughter. For years he carried the heavy weight of their financial struggles all by himself, working long, grueling double shifts at a local manufacturing plant. His back always ached, his muscles were constantly sore, and his hands were covered in rough calluses. But no matter how exhausted he was, he made a strict promise to himself. The moment he walked through the front door of their tiny apartment, his tiredness had to disappear. He refused to let her see the stress of the bills piling up on the kitchen counter. He wanted her childhood to feel magical and safe, believing that if he smiled big enough, she would never know how close they were to losing everything. He became an expert at making invisible sacrifices. When serving dinner, he would scoop almost all the food onto her plastic plate, leaving just a tiny spoonful of plain white rice for himself. When she asked why he wasn't eating, he would laugh cheerfully and lie, telling her he had already eaten a massive lunch at the factory and was simply too stuffed to finish. In reality, his stomach was twisting in knots from hunger, but he kept his smile steady. When the freezing winter rains arrived, he walked 3 miles to work in the pouring downpour, because they couldn't afford the city bus fare for both of them. He used the last of his spare cash to buy her a monthly school bus pass, so she would always stay warm and dry. When she noticed a giant, jagged hole in the bottom of his old work shoes, he joked that the hole was a special air conditioning feature to keep his feet cool. In reality, he cut out pieces of thick cardboard from empty cereal boxes and shoved them inside his shoes to block the freezing ground. He truly believed an 8-year-old would just accept his silly words and never think twice about it. Then came a fateful Tuesday night. His daughter had fallen asleep at the kitchen table while doing her 3rd-grade math homework. Before carrying her to bed, she had whimpered about needing a plastic ruler for a geometry project the next morning. Knowing that she would lose points on her grade without it, he waited until she was sound asleep, and then he quietly went into her dark bedroom to search. He checked her desk, looked through her school backpack, and finally knelt down by the side of her bed, thinking the ruler might have rolled underneath the frame. His hand reached deep between the mattress and the wooden slats. His fingers didn't find a plastic ruler. Instead, they brushed against something thick and paper-bound. Curious, he pulled it out. It was a cheap, pink notebook with a cartoon unicorn sticker on the cover. He felt a slight pang of guilt, knowing a diary should be private, but as he turned it over, he saw a title written on the front cover in messy, uneven 3rd-grade handwriting. The words were written in a bright purple crayon. "Daddy's superpowers. Keep out." Smiling softly, he imagined it would be full of funny drawings of himself, dressed up like a comic book superhero with a cape. He gently cracked the cover open and sat down on the floor. But as his eyes scanned the very first page, the smile completely faded from his face. The letters were big and crooked, and as he read them, the reality of what he had done hit him instantly. The first entry was from March. She had written about the night he claimed he wasn't hungry because of a big lunch at work. She wrote that he forgot his lunchbox was still sitting on the kitchen counter, completely empty, and that he gave her his dinner because they didn't have enough food. She concluded that his superpower was making food appear out of nowhere for her. His eyes widened, and he gasped softly, his hand rushing to cover his mouth. He had been so sure she hadn't noticed the empty lunchbox. His hands started to shake slightly as he turned to an entry from May. The school had asked for $20 for a field trip to the Science Museum. She wrote that she had lied to him, saying science was boring, because she had seen him crying while looking at the water bill the night before. But the next morning, The money was in her backpack anyway. She wrote that her dad didn't buy the new work shoes he needed, and that his superpower was making her dreams come true, even when it hurt his feet. Tears were now dripping rapidly from his eyes, landing softly on the paper pages. His chest heaved as he tried to keep his crying quiet so he wouldn't wake up his sleeping daughter. He could barely see the words through his blurred vision, but he forced himself to keep reading. An entry from October described a pouring, rainy day when he gave her his last $5 for the city bus so she wouldn't get her hair wet. She wrote about watching him through the bus window as he walked down the road, looking so small in the rain and shivering. She wrote, "He thinks I don't see him struggle. He thinks I am just a little kid, but I see everything. He gives up everything for me." Finally, he reached the very last page of the notebook. At the bottom, there was a large hand-drawn heart. Inside the heart, a long list of numbers was added up to a total. Next to the total, a final paragraph was written in bold, dark pencil. It read, "Total number of Daddy's superpowers this year, 142. My daddy is not a regular man. He thinks he's hiding a secret from me. But the real secret is that I know he is a hero. He wears broken shoes so I can wear nice ones. When I grow up and get a big job, I'm going to buy him 1,000,000 pairs of boots, and he will never have to walk in the rain again. I love you, Daddy." He pressed the little pink notebook tightly against his chest and bowed his head, rocking back and forth silently on the floor, weeping tears of pure emotion. The crushing weight of shame and guilt that he had carried for years, the constant, painful feeling that he was a failure of a father because they were poor, instantly turned into ash. In that single moment, the absolute truth hit him like a wave. He thought he had been exposing his daughter to the harsh, ugly realities of lack and poverty. He thought he was failing to provide a good life. But the notebook proved the exact opposite. He hadn't been exposing her to poverty at all. He had been giving her a masterclass in unconditional, fierce love. The next morning, the kitchen was filled with warm, golden sunlight. He stood at the stove, flipping pancakes. He still looked tired, but his face looked incredibly light, and a deep peace was written all over his features. The door opened, and his daughter walked into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes and yawning in her pajamas. She looked up and smiled, wishing him a good morning. He immediately dropped his spatula onto the counter, turned around, dropped down to his knees, and extended his arms as wide as they could go. She ran straight into his embrace. He wrapped his arms around her tightly, burying his face in her shoulder, holding her much longer and much tighter than he ever had before. When she giggled and told him he was squeezing her like a giant bear, asking what was wrong, his voice cracked with emotion. He smiled beautifully and told her that nothing was wrong at all, that she was his favorite person in the whole universe, and that they were going to be just fine. He never told her that he found the notebook. He left it exactly where it belonged, keeping her secret safe, just like she had kept his. But everything had changed inside his heart. He realized that true wealth isn't measured by the amount of money in a bank account or the brand of shoes on a person's feet. It is measured by the deep, unbreakable love in a home. And in that tiny, cramped apartment, they were the richest people alive.